Hello and welcome to this session where I'll be speaking with Tomas Diez on the Smart Cities and Smart Citizens project that he's co-founder of. My name's Jules Hayward. I'm the Education Program Lead at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Tomas at the International Fab Lab conference in Barcelona that was run this year. It's a participatory session, so please do make sure you use the Q&A space on Google Hangouts. If you have a Google Plus account, then you can use that freely on the right-hand side of the screen. Otherwise, if you don't, you can just use a Twitter account by using hashtag ThinkDiff. So keep the conversation moving. It's open to discussion and debate, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts as we move through the session with Tomas. Tomas is initiator of the Fab Lab Barcelona projects and is co-founder of the Smart Citizen project that we're here be talking to us about today. The session will feature an online interview where we'll be discussing some of these projects with Tomas and the thinking behind them on the future of the city. Topics will include things like digital fabrication tools to transform the reality and the way in which we use our access to data within an urban environment. Tomas is particularly interested in digital technologies and the way this can change people as consumer behavior and how we produce and relate to products and services within cities. To give a little bit of background about Tomas, he's a Venezuelan-born urbanist who specializes in digital fabrication and its implications for the future of cities. He's director of the Fab Cities project at the Institute of Advanced Architecture in Catalonia, and one of the initiators of the Fab Lab Barcelona projects. He holds a bachelor degree in urban planning and society, a diploma in social work, a master's in advanced architecture at the IAC, and also a diploma in digital fabrication with the Fab Academy that's run through MIT and the Center for Bits and Atoms. He also is currently working on a PhD at the University College London, and just in case he wasn't busy enough, is still progressing the work on this Smart Citizen project that we're really interested to hear more about from Tomas today. So without any further ado, I'd like to move over to you, Tomas, and hear a little bit more about the Smart Citizens project, its origins, and specifically where it's up to now and what the project's currently working on.
Thanks for the introduction, Jules, and hello everyone from Mexico, actually. Well, to give a little bit of background on Smart Citizen, as you said, I'm an urbanist, and I always been interested on cities. And more recently, I've been interested on the invisible part of the city. I mean, besides or beyond the built space of the streets, the public space, all the infrastructure, there is something about cities that we haven't explored enough, and it's all the information flows, the data that is being produced by people, the information about the environment in the city that started to point some interest on me in the last year, in the recent years. Like back 3 or 4 years, I started to look for technology to do this with a group of researchers at IAC in Barcelona, and we found out that everything that we could find in the market was expensive, unreliable, and very difficult to use. So we say, okay, the only way we can do this is actually to building it by ourselves. And that was in parallel on the development of a Fab Lab in Barcelona, which provided us the infrastructure and the skills to develop our own sensor platform, also to write our own software and programs to run our own platform, and basically to start to promote the capture of data in the city in a different way. It means that if you think about the recent approach on the smart cities by corporations and governments, back 3 years ago, they were pointing out that the smart city would be Basically, the addition of a technological layer into the city to allow for city governments to do better management and therefore to have more efficiency in optimization of resources in cities. So it implies that it will be an infrastructure that it will be developed by corporations and then managed by governments. And then we were wondering, where is the citizen in all this formula? No? And somehow what we said is like, okay, if we want to sense the city, the best way we can do it is using the citizens as the infrastructure, or people's houses as infrastructure. No? So thanks to that, we put those ideas together. And basically, I'm going to share my screen now to show a little video of what we did. What's basically in 2013, we launched a crowdfunding campaign in Kickstarter, basically to raise the funds to run the project and to develop the technology necessary to run the project. In 30 days, we raised $68,000, as you can see in the screen, out of more than 500 backers in the world. So with that, we developed the first version of a kit that is compatible with Arduino. It's an existing open source platform to develop electronics projects. And we basically wrote our own software and applications to visualize that data and also to provide people the tools to use that data. It means that the people in this scenario that we are envisioning, the people is the owner of the infrastructure. It means people owns the devices. People deploy their devices in their houses. It means in their balconies or in their windows, in front of the streets. So I mean, we are not trying to get private data from people, but actually public data from their environment. And then that kit will connect through a Wi-Fi antenna to an online platform that will allow them to visualize that data, to share it, to socialize it, and with an API, but basically build third-party applications in which they can do their own stuff, like their own sound visualization, some specific area of the city. Some people have been using that data to do 3D printed experiments on basically aggregating this information. So what we want to do is actually set up the framework and then wait for the unexpected. No? So this is basically, this is 2 years ago, and I'm going to show you the future. This is the past, and this is the future. This is actually our new landing page that we haven't launched yet, and this is totally classified information, if you want to say. And basically, what we're trying to do is to make people to understand how this could be useful for many, let's say, communities and groups of interest, which we think is basically. And from the use of the kits that we have had so far is among the researchers in universities and institutions and schools, and how we can insert the learning about open data and open source platforms like Arduino to kids. Citizen science groups of interest, which have been pointing very interesting issues on environmental conditions of the city in many parts of the world. We think about communities as well, communities of interest, and one interesting one that we are working now is in beekeepers, both in the UK and also in the United States. So we started to find like groups of interest very specific in a very specific target. Then the cities itself, like as an organization, what has been interesting is that we launched this project as to raise a voice against a top-down approach of city planning and development. And we have had a couple of really nice experiments, one in Manchester and one in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, we collaborated with the Smart City project in Amsterdam, and we have deployed 100 kits a few months ago, and doing a very interesting experiment with the VAC Society. And then developers, which means people that want to use this data to build their own applications, and then this data to do interesting stuff with it. No? So basically, how it looks like. This is, as you see the map, this is real-time data of the world. And this is people actually that have sensors located in many places. They could be indoors or outdoors, basically. No? And if I navigate and I try to explore where are these sensors, I will see how people is using this data. And actually I can see who is this person. I can eventually message him. I can start to contact the people that is using this data, and also basically compare it with my data and start to understand what's going on in my neighborhood, in my city, or even though in the world. No? So again, this is an ongoing experiment. Smart Citizen aims to be an open source platform. This is just a beginning. We are now actually redefining most of the parts of the project. One interesting one is related with basically with the quality of the data. That has been an issue. Has been a very interesting issue because the sensors in the sensor market has been is very tricky, and we can say that some of the sensors that we have been using are not totally reliable, and that's a challenge for us. Is actually make meaningful data out of these low-cost sensors that people can use for their own applications and interests. So I think that this is like a very short introduction, and if you want to continue with another question or comments from people all over.
Yeah, thank you. I think just one of my first questions was around defining what a smart citizen is, and you kind of touched on it there around this growth in crowdsourced data, and how you'd currently define a smart citizen, and then kind of leading on from that, what is being put in place to enable the kind of crowdsourced data to have a degree of usability. So what's the kind of quality controls that come in on that to make it really valuable, usable data within different contexts? So a few questions in that.
Yeah, well, in relation with what the smart citizen is, I think that for me is people that can use tools to have to have a political voice on action into the city. It means that people that can move from being a passive consumer to an active producer. No? So if you think about the last 200 years, the industrialized model have actually converted us in people that we just use your time to work, to get money, to buy stuff, and that's it. No? So with the introduction of digital fabrication tools, open sourcing projects like Arduino, people is having access to develop their own tools. And actually, you cannot complain saying, no, I want to do this, but I cannot find this tool. So you can go to your Fab Lab, to your hackerspace, to your makerspace, or get together with people, download some projects that some people have used before in Arduino, 3D print some stuff, and then build prototypes and start to deploy them, then do a crowdfunding campaign, and then basically you can raise the funds to your project. So I think that this is a new condition for things to happen that it haven't happened before. Of course, the internet and the power of computation has powered that. It means that we have turned, for instance, if you think about what happened with the model of content or media content by the eruption of internet, you can see how people have become producers of content. No? So if you think about 20 years ago, you will go to a wedding and there will be only one or two photographers taking pictures of the groom and the bride, and then they will deliver the pictures afterwards. No? So now if you go to a wedding, then you have as many photographers as invited people to the wedding. So everyone has become a photographer. No? You can, even the priest, it becomes a photographer. No? But the thing is that, what happens when we take this to the physical world? And then this is where digital fabrication is basically open up these conditions. It means that as we download or we produce and upload a video in YouTube, we can actually download a thing and produce it, or design a thing and upload it, and someone else can download it somewhere else and produce it. It means that you have tools to act in the physical world, which really changed totally the game. No? I think that for me, actually the naming of the smart citizen is more like a marketing thing, and it was more like a critical design experiment. It's saying, now you have smart cities. Oh, how smart is I can recall many conferences I went about the smart cities in which CTO or managers of the cities were introducing how they will have a control room in which they will turn on and off things in the city, and they control everything from a single room, looking like a NASA kind of rocket launch kind of. This is this iconic image of many screens, and then you see all the city or CCTV cameras everywhere, and then the mayor is like this Dr. Evil pressing buttons and controlling everything. So we were saying, okay, this is the smart city. No way. We need smart citizens, and we have the tools to do that. So yeah, I think that's one part. Then the side of the quality of the data is critical. And our exercise included the selection of sensors based on which is the kind of information is meaningful in the city. In this case, The sensors that are more, let's say, sensitive to be criticized about the quality of their data is the sensors about their quality. The thing is that in the market of air quality sensors until now, we had been only using industrial sensors. It means that, and I'm saying we, I say all the sensor, almost all the 99% sensor companies or sensor devices companies, they have been using sensors that are designed to be using in higher concentrations of pollutants, right? When you go to the city, we don't raise that industrial levels of pollution. It means you need more sensitive sensors, and that's still under development in the sensor industry. For us, one of the criteria to select the sensors was, first of all, let's say the type of sensors. This means that we're using nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide sensors for air quality. We have sound, temperature, humidity, light, Wi-Fi connections, density, and solar radiation. But then in terms of the air quality sensors, we were trying to measure the pollutants coming from the combustion of fossil fuels. That's nitrogen dioxide and carbon monoxide. These sensors are industrial. And then they were within the industrial, we needed to find the cheaper ones that people can access to buy these sensors, because you can go from $10 to $1,000 and more in terms of the sensors, no? So we selected the cheaper ones, which need a lot of calibration, and people doesn't have yet this kind of knowledge on how to calibrate sensors. And therefore, the data quality of the air quality sensors that we have is very, let's say, you can actually argue that it's not good yet. And that's what we are working now. In the next iteration of our hardware, we include newer sensors that are sensitive, that are designed to measure air quality in cities.
Thank you. I think it's really useful for people who are just coming in new to this to hear some of the actual examples of what is being measured, and kind of then see how that might have an impact. Do you have any examples of the measurement of this data then having an impact on how regional or city councils are responding? Is there any examples where councils have made adjustments, have responded to this specific data capture?
Yeah, I think this question is tricky, and we have been asked about this many times. No, how your data has been used, what it has actually changed. It has really produced any change on policy or in a condition in an area. No, I have to say we are only 2 years old, and we're facing all these issues about their data quality, and then people might, if you go with the data that we're capturing now without being calibrated, the city council would say, we're not going to take this as a valid data. That's the truth. But we have been doing something very interesting. I think that we have influenced the way of policy making, or the policy making around the smart cities. As I said before, 3 years ago, people were talking about control rooms full of screens and buttons in which the evil mayor will control the city. 3 years after, people is talking about the smart cities should be produced by smart citizens. This is included in the agenda of the European Union. It's been included in the agenda of the Smart City Amsterdam. It's included in the agenda of the Smart City Barcelona. It's included in the agenda of the Smart City Manchester. And then we have many interests, and now we're working on collaborations in Kosovo, in Brazil, and many other places in the world, in which not only people that wants to complain about an issue in the city is actually asking to have the Smart Citizens Kits as a tool, but actually city councils are asking to have the Smart Citizen Toolkit as part of their ecosystem. So for us, that's a great success. And now our compromise is basically what I said before, is finalizing a very robust platform with reliable data and with an infrastructure that people actually can rely on. And that's happening in the next couple of months.
That's fantastic. I know when I attended the Fab10 conference, there was this pledge by Barcelona as a city to become self-sufficient by 2030. And this was a fantastic kind of marker and vision for Barcelona as a city, who's who's obviously very well progressed in this area and very ambitious. How much of that pledge do you see being driven by the city council and local authority level, and how much do you see being driven by the community, and what's the dynamic between the two? And if you can kind of give examples of that, that would be fantastic, because I kind of you know, saw some of those examples when I visited, the Fab Labs being used by the community to come up with solutions to local issues and working directly with the council on that. And it was the first actually happening and being effective. So could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, well, I usually joke about how the mayor pushed the button, and I'm not sure he knew about the size of the commitment that he was taking. But actually, yeah, I mean, we want to turn Barcelona into a more self-sufficient city. No, I mean, totally self-sufficient might be too arrogant to say in 40 years, but at least reduce the dependency of products produced dozens of miles away and then being imported into the city and then turned into trash and not being used. So yeah, this is a challenge that we actually take it as a serious challenge, and we want it to be as a joint project, not only driven by the city council or centralizing the city council, but actually I think that the formula is basic, and I call it the Fab City project, is trying to put together research, communities, governance, and corporations together to follow this objective on bringing back productivity into the city. No? What is being done until today is actually we have installed successfully two public fab labs, which is a new infrastructure that doesn't exist almost anywhere else. It's trying to think like a new type of social place for making, social place for production, where people learn how to use these technologies, but actually with meaning in relation with their reality. You know? This is happening today. I mean, there are one of the fab labs in the district of Las Corts in a very wealthy area, you can say, and then the other fab lab located in the No Barris district, which is a more deprived area with more challenges related with unemployment and immigration issues. No, this is happening today as two prototypes of a public infrastructure based on digital fabrication. In parallel, we have the Fab Lab Barcelona, the first Fab Lab in Europe, founded in 2007, that actually we managed to take our agenda into the policy of the city. You know, again, it's more or less, as I was saying, in relation with smart city, the smart citizen. It's like we are good maybe convincing politicians, you can say. And then we just opened the Green Fab Lab in the Colserola Park. And this will be also a prototyping space in the city that will research about the more sustainable practices, looking forward what's next how we can turn Fab Labs more sustainable, how digital fabrication could be more in harmony with nature. No? And then I would say that if you can think about this, is the Green Fab Lab, the Fab Lab Barcelona has been promoted by, you can call it research institute like ours, is IAC behind it. Then you have the public Fab Labs being promoted by the city government. Then you have places like Made Makerspace and Makers of Barcelona that are more community. Well, Makers of Barcelona is more like a business-driven, and then Made Makerspace is more like a community-driven. No? So in the city, it's starting to happen a lot of interest, not only by us or only by the government or only by a group of people, but actually from different sectors that you can identify that are very different in interest, in terms of interest, that are providing or kind of creating this kind of ecosystem around digital fabrication in the city. Again, I think in parallel with Smart Citizen, we are very early days of what could be the impact of these digital fabrication places in the city. No? But you can see small examples, no? The way of people is starting to do business, how new startups around technology and the 3D printing companies are being created in Barcelona. So I think there is opening up alternatives for a city that only relies on the very cheap, very low quality tourism to something more interesting in terms of content production and research. No?
Sure, thank you. Before Before I move to the next question, I just wanted to encourage people to use the chat space, ask questions on the Google Plus through their accounts or through Twitter with the hashtag ThinkDiff. Thomas, just tying into that point you were making, I was really interested to see this initiative around publicly funded, maker libraries, or Fab Labs in Barcelona. It was brought up with this session with Mark Miodownik, who's the material scientist from UCL who started the Institute of Making there, and he was talking about how libraries actually could transition into becoming maker spaces and actually be of great public service in that respect. Can you talk a bit about how you see the effects of these Fab Labs on cities on a global scale? Can you see that there's more of these public spaces being transformed into these interdisciplinary environments, and what effect do you think it's having on a global scale in that respect?
I think that you can have some parallelisms on how libraries have been served to people in the past. No, if you think, and then that's basically related with accessibility from people to a specific thing. In this case, libraries at the first hand, they were providing access to books, to the information to people, because back in the past, people were not used to have we were not used to have our own library in our houses. So you would have access to kind of infrastructure that you cannot, have in your house, or you cannot have personally, Then with the introduction of computers in our life, I'm jumping like many hundreds of years, but the introduction of the computers, if you think about, again, like maybe 20 years ago or so, if you wanted to use a computer, you would go to a place where there were a lot of computers and people were using the computers there. So the computers and people were really separated. Now we carry many computers in on us. Wearables are coming in. We depend basically on a supercomputer that is a smartphone that we carry every day. We hold it in our pockets. So computers are embedded in our life. Books are basically everywhere because books provide knowledge. Now knowledge is being provided in a different way. I mean, now people is looking more for micro pieces of knowledge instead of reading a whole book. This is very interesting as well. So we have delocalized this idea of going to a place to have access to books or to have access to computers, because basically they are being embedded in our life. And with digital fabrication tools, we are in the dawn of what it's going to be. So yes, we will need this type of infrastructure for people to have access to means for production. It means that you can have a 3D printer in your house, right? Or you can own a 3D printer with some friends. I actually own a 3D printer with another friend. But you cannot maybe you cannot have as your living room, no? Or you cannot make circuit boards in your studio, in your house. So that's why places like Fab Labs or places like libraries with digital fabrication tools are needed. It's actually providing this kind of infrastructure that people cannot carry in their house, and they will be significant for their lives. What I really expect is that in a few years now, let's say, hopefully in less than 20 years, we won't need to go to a Fab Lab, and Fab Labs disappear. Basically, we will have digital fabrication technologies embedded in our life. And then what I mean is that if you want to buy something and make it by yourself, I don't know, I think like most probably, and I'm totally sure that IKEA will shift from just giving you pre-assembled or disassembled furniture pieces to actually giving you the tools to design your own furniture and make it in their infrastructure. So you will see. I will make a prediction, and the prediction is that IKEA will move to have very large warehouses outside the cities to small factories in the city, in which people will go design and make their own furniture, and they will pay for a service, and that will happen. So yes, I think that the transition is now, we need maybe the public body, and then we need a lot of education work on how people will learn how to use these tools. It happened with computation, again, 20 years ago. And then we will see how businesses will be created around it in the different models. No? Right now, you have business like Materialize or Shapeways, in which you can upload, you can design something and then ask for them to deliver you the 3D printed thing. A more interesting one is platforms like 3D hubs. 3D hubs actually, if you have a 3D printer, 3D hubs allow you to make some economic exploitation out of your 3D printer. It means like it becomes part of a distributed infrastructure of 3D printers in which you can claim the production of a thing, and then you will find that someone in your neighborhood has a 3D printer, and actually you can outsource that production to your neighbor. No? So again, this is the kind of new relationships that we're starting to have in terms of how we produce, how we consume, how we relate with each other. Maybe the transaction between your neighbor and you is not money, but actually, I don't know. Maybe we can trade, a 3D printed cup for some coffee, or I don't know. So,
yeah. Thank you. We've been hearing from a number of the kind of network of Fab Labs over the course of the Disruptive Innovation Festival about the role of IP and the kind of regulation in the maker movement, and it would be good to hear your experience in relation to this for Smart Citizen. How much is it protected from an intellectual property perspective, and what are your kind of views on IP when it comes to the maker movement itself?
For me, IP is totally obsolete, no? And the proof is in practice, a Smart Citizen is totally open source. The whole design of a kit and the platform that is being designed is going to be released in open source. No? So I think it's fundamental to think that production models are linked to kind of legal models and also economical models. So the idea of IP came out of a kind of society in which production resources were handled by a really small amount of people, and then you needed to protect the designs because somehow you wanted to explode one thing that has been designed and then produce it many times and then distribute it. No? In a model in which maybe production is basically distributed everywhere, what having IP is I think, personally, is ridiculous. Also, thinking about that your smartphone is becoming a 3D scanner, and thinking about that you can 3D print anything anywhere, or basically use a Fab Lab almost in every city in the world to produce something designed by yourself. So what is more interesting is to see how people is collaborating and how people is building on top of other people's design. I think still, what I think is open source doesn't mean free. What is the gap here is actually find a good way of doing open source based projects or products that could be also economically successful. And it means that when you design something and someone else is making an economic exploitation out of it, you can actually get some revenue. I think Creative Commons tried to do something similar with software, but I think that something that will help a lot to build these kind of things is actually the blockchain model used in Bitcoin that actually allows people to have more reliable contracts and how, keep track of how things have been designed, produced, and developed, and also have more open and transparency contracts and transparency in terms of what is being innovated, what things are being innovated and produced and designed and shared. So I think that's for me, the right path. That is going to happen. I'm sure it's not. You saw like at the end of the 90s, Napster crashed the music industry, and the most intelligent one of taking advantage of that was Steve Jobs, and created iTunes. No one else saw that coming. I think that and imagine producing a record, it needs some infrastructure, but it's not as much infrastructure as producing things. No, producing music is not as expensive as setting up a factory, taking out the raw materials, transporting them, turning into products, then distribute them. So it's a lot more of investment, it's a lot of more interest, and I see that it's going to be really hard.
Yeah, I think tying into that point, another question has come in asking about the role of governments. I mean, is it the role of governments to ensure that data is publicly available and not monopolized by large corporations? I think as we start to see this growing momentum behind crowdsourced data, how can we ensure that remains in the public domain and doesn't just become a commodity for multinationals to profit over?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's now we are living in a very interesting moment. No, it's very paradoxical that we are talking about all of this using a Google platform. No, when Google actually builds its empire on top of our personal data. No, basically it's that, and how we give some rights and give some ownership of things to third parties based on free tools or free software that we are using now. No? I highly recommend an article wrote by Julian Assange in Newsweek, I think, last week, in which he actually explains what's the relationship between Eric Schmidt and the Department of Defense. No, I think the large corporations that are actually doing transactions with people's data are becoming also the most kind of powerful defense strategist for, the U.S. government. And they were saying what Lockheed and Martin was for the U.S. government in the 20th century, Google or Facebook will be for in terms of defense of the interest of the United States in this case. But I don't want to go to this kind of imperialist kind of discourse. I'm more practical and more pragmatical. I'm okay using Google things, and I will see how things will evolve. But at the same time, I think we need to develop. And again, we have the power to develop tools as an alternative, and I think we have enough knowledge available on the internet. We have enough tools and people to work with, and we maybe need more kind of conditions like these fabrication spaces or physical spaces in which people can meet, design, and make things that will create some solutions. No. Well, and again, one of the examples is a smart cities, and that's why I say it's possible. I also say that we want to work with governments. We want to work with corporations. I don't say that they are evil. It's better to get inside the evil and try to change it, or we will become evil. We don't know. But basically, we want to keep doing what we do, and we think that people should have more ownership of their data, of their information, and actually, I like. Another author is Jaron Lanier. In his most recent book, Who Wants the Future, he claims that if people can have a piece of the cake that Google or Facebook create with their personal data, we can basically create a new economical model in which you get revenues out of your personal data being used. And there have been some MIT researchers doing an application that you can install in your phone, and every time that some third-party application is using your data to do business somewhere else, you can get some part of it, some revenue. So imagine this kind of new way of how you administrate, manage your data, and how you can take profit out of it. No? It doesn't matter if machines and computers are taking people's jobs, but actually what creates wealth is the interaction between people. And as long as we have the tools to to manage those interactions and to understand them, maybe we can have some alternative to the exhausted economic model that we have.
Yeah, thank you. Just linking to that around access, there's a question that's come in. It says, you seem to need a certain amount of technical know-how to utilize the Smart Citizen Sensor Kit. Is there a danger that we're excluding those without the skills or education from participating and contributing to this area? And what are you trying to do around making it more accessible?
Well, one of the things is that as every other technology in its early days is a little bit exclusive. No, maybe it's not totally democratic. It's not plug and play, and that's a problem. But also, is the question about that is part of the solution. It means that we don't expect to have a product that people can use as a as a McDonald's kind of. We're not trying to McDonaldize the way people capture data. We're trying to do the opposite. We're trying people to get interested into Arduino and to understand what a sensor is, to understand what a microcontroller is, because basically computation, it's everywhere. It's in our life, and we now rely more than 90% of our lives in computers, and people don't understand computers, and that's almost ridiculous. It's like well, I cannot find an example, no, but our claim is that we need people to understand that this is a new knowledge that is being created, and you have to have access to that, and you have to learn new skills. And I can find an example. 20 years ago, again, with the rise of computers or internet, people were saying, oh, I don't know how to use the computer. There was someone in the office that was using the computer and printing. No? Printing a paper was like a rocket science. No? It was one person that maybe was handling computer. There was someone else that was doing some paperwork with a pen and just paper. No? But now computers are everywhere. Again, we have learned new skills. And my mom, I remember my mom 10 years ago would say I would never use a computer, and now she added me in Facebook like, I don't know, a couple of years ago. So we have been introduced new skills and new ways of using technology. And I expect that programming a microcontroller is something that could be taught at schools. Designing something in 3D and producing it should be taught at schools, and that's going to happen. What happens today? There is a gap, it's true. We have identified that we have a low participation we have delivered around 1,000 kits all over the world, and there has been very low participation based on many issues. No? But two important ones are the one I mentioned before in relation with the data quality. Means if people doesn't relate in the data, they don't use it, and then they don't care. And then secondly, people have had some issues on setting up the kit. That's true. That's true. We are working on a better way of interfacing with that, but at the same time, we have reduced a huge gap in how people can use sensors, because we suffer it. We suffer having to. If you wanted to do a sensor project that streams data into the internet, you had to buy an Arduino, then you had to put some sensors on top of the Arduino, then you have to put a lot of Arduino shields, and it will become something very expensive and very weird to use because you need to use libraries from different sensors, from different boards. We reduce that gap into something that you can connect with your USB into your computer. You don't need to use Arduino. You actually go to our website, smartcitizen.me, and you can program your microcontroller from the website. That's something that we have done thanks to a collaboration that we are doing with a company based in Greece called CodeBender, but basically allows people not having to go through download an Arduino, to modify code and so on, but basically using a more kind of friendly way of programming a microcontroller. No? They still program the microcontroller, but without having to interface to something that they see that very far away from them. So this process has been partially successful. Of course, some things work in Windows, some things doesn't work in Mac, and these kind of issues. We have gone through these kind of issues. The next iteration, as I said before, not only in the hardware, that is going to be more high-quality sensors and more reliable sensors. We also are working in the online platform, meaning that it's more robust. People will use it in any platform, and they can program their boards and start to send data without having to have so many crashes on Java updates and these kind of things.
Yeah, thanks. We've also had a question that links to something that came up at Fab 10. So, I mean, obviously within the Disruptive Innovation Festival, we're looking at circular economy, and we're looking at this kind of take, make, dispose model shifting to more regenerative cycles. And it links with this question through the work that Neil Gershenfield has done with setting up the Fab Lab network, and Neil's vision of product in, trash out, transitioning towards data in, data out. And the question is really, can you talk more about that and describe that for people? What does that mean, data in, data out, and what is the kind of idea behind that vision?
Well, I have to say that first, that I can tell you, Neil never imagined that the Fab Lab network will grow in the way it is growing. And he said it has been an accident. I think the Center for Bits and Atoms never imagined that a group of people would believe that this is possible and have worked day and night to make it happen. So it's really interesting of going from a vision of a scientist to going to a social project that is the Fab Labs. No, I think that's very interesting, going from science to social. No. The growth of a Fab Lab network in the last 10 years have raised up many questions. No, one is, I mean, what's the purpose of science itself? I mean, what's the purpose of technology by itself? And basically, what we understood is that these places cannot be like a cool nerd club, right? It couldn't be like an elitist place where people go and play with useless projects and they don't do anything. And then out of many meetings we have had between Barcelona and Boston, which imply the mayor of Barcelona, implies Vicente Guayart, who is the city architect, implies Antoni Vives, who is the deputy mayor, and Neil Gershenfeld itself, came this model of from Pito to Dido. It means from product in, trash out, to data in, data out. No? Product trash out, I introduced a little bit before, is the cities. If you kind of try to understand in a very simplistic way how cities operate today, they import most of the products that are being consumed. No, they come from thousands of miles away. They are used and disposed, and most of the times, the disposal products out of those products is not being used. No, and then if you use digital fabrication as a platform, if you bring back productivity to the city, if you again introduce practices more related with circular economy, with the kind of work that you are doing in the foundation, then you can have, or you can envision that the cities could start to have like a more closed cycle of the matter. No? So it means that objects, products, devices, things that we need to live and sustain life in cities are produced within the city, or at least within a certain acceptable radius of cost of transportation, and also more importantly, knowledge cost. No? I think that we took out the knowledge of production of the cities, and then basically we're just operating in kind of an almost automata way of, again, working, earning money, buying things, that's it. No? So this transition of introducing digital fabrication tools, thinking about more like a circular practices into the city, will lead us to a model that is called data in, data out. It means that all things are produced in the city. Whatever comes in and out is just the information about how things are produced. It means that IKEA doesn't need to ship things to the warehouse, but actually ships the information to these kind of smaller places, more kind of. I imagine that having like a more like a high-tech medieval city, no? And then you have your house, and then you have your little workshop in which you produce things, and you can make some business out of it. No? So yeah, I think that data in, data out is leading to that. It means that we recover the productivity into the city, the knowledge of how things are produced, and also, I mean, we introduce more sustainable practices in relation of where things come from. And some people will say, yeah, but we will still need to cut trees in the Amazon, no, to make furniture. But not necessarily. I mean, if you think about, and for sure you know better than me, the amount of things that we have extracted already from the nature is huge. So we have a lot of raw materials that actually are contained into trash that we need to recover, and we need to introduce into our productive model. And that's a challenge, I think, for industry.
Yeah, thank you. That makes me think of a comment I've heard you make around seeing the Fab Lab network as a giant brain, and it kind of ties into this thought that these are spaces where you have many different disciplines working together.
Yeah.
And I was curious as to where you see that taking cities as a whole. What shift will that start to have on cities and city planning now that we are able to connect with citizens in this more engaged way, and just kind of tying into your vision behind that of the giant brain as a concept, which I really liked.
Well, that's actually is a reality, no? That today we can have the aggregation of thoughts, of ideas, of knowledge between people using the internet platforms, no? And it has happened. You can recall it to develop projects that are more like a product driven, or to have political action. You can recall it in the Arab Spring, how people actually coordinate between them using the internet or communication platforms. It means that you can have an articulated way of operating as the whole, no? And that's, I think that we have lost that. No? We vote every 4 years and that's it, or every 5 years, and then we forget about it's our actually compromise with the city itself. No? And what is interesting, this is getting political. Besides being a brain, also that brain needs to think of what is good for that, for it. No? So, and it will get political when that brain realizes that the way that we use transportation it needs to be changed, and then basically we might eliminate cars from cities or from central areas of the cities, or ownership of things might be obsolete, and then we start to introduce the collaborative economic practices. And that's a very clear example of how this brain is articulated. No, I think that this is a challenge of imagine a new policy making and imagine the new role of governments, and basically will be a struggle for power, and that we will see it happening in the coming years. In Spain, I live in Barcelona. In Spain now there is a political transition that is being very interesting, and and we need to get political. I think this doesn't make any sense if it doesn't get political. Now there is a race of a new political party that actually introduced more participatory processes, and has become in less than 6 months in the first political force in a country. Never happened before. So people want to have a voice. People want to participate. People want fresh ideas, and technology is actually a channel to fuel that. And we haven't used it enough. We used it to share our meals in Instagram and do other stuff. Actually, could be more useful than that.
Yeah, another interesting question has come in around that Smart Citizen emphasizes the role of the citizen and this crowdsource element, but we also see a growth in automation, drones, self-driving cars. Can you talk a bit about the interplay between these two, and any kind of examples that are coming up from that? Because I saw a bit of that at Fab 10 and was really excited by that.
Well, I'm kind of a little bit, how do you call it? I'm not really excited about drones beyond the nice videos they do. and it's like these kind of promises around the new technologies of today. I think they are going into things that are overcomplicating what we really need. I think that we don't need driverless cars to optimize transportation into cities. We don't need UAVs, to do other stuff than doing really nice videos from above. I don't know from what else you can use it. You can say, okay, to ship stuff, but I don't know, if you produce things distributedly, then you don't need to ship stuff with drones, no? And at the same, you ask yourself, where is Google Glass? Where are the Google Glass? Like, they were supposedly to be a revolution into whatever, a lot of marketing, a lot of PR, but then the reality is that the needs are basically not that, they are closer to what the human life is, and we don't need to overcomplicate what we really need. And the technology has been underused for what we really need, I think. And while we think that we are doing huge steps on the development of technology, on having, these glasses with a mini screen and makes you move your head in a very strange way, or driverless cars that, okay, great, or drones that, okay, great. I think that there are issues that we can solve with technology that we are not addressing. I think that those are more interesting.
Sure, thank you. I think one of the things that was really interesting at Fab 10 was this engagement of the city of Barcelona and the community within it, and I was interested to hear about some of the outcomes of engaging the citizens in Barcelona in Fab 10. I haven't been able to catch up on that so much, so I thought I'd use this opportunity to hear from you. You obviously had a huge amount of footfall over the course of the Fab 10 conference from citizens right across the city, and I was wondering what some of the outcomes of that have been.
Well, I think that the impact that we produce in the city is actually giving us now its first results. No, we started yesterday a prototype with a school in our neighborhood on having a part of the curriculum related with digital fabrication. No? We are being asked to introduce a kind of a stream of content in the Smart City Expo related with Fab cities. We have been asked to propose and to curate a pavilion, an exhibition pavilion in the most important construction event of Spain that is called Construmat, that is going to happen May 2015, and it will affect the construction kind of sector, which is the more traditional, the more powerful in Spain. In relation to communities, I think that and right now making and digital fabrication has been seen more as a hobby or kind of recreational practice. But what is when this comes into schools, I think that is when parents start to take it more seriously, no? And I think that our key target now is the Fab Kids program, no? And trying to encourage more kids into the use of these digital fabrication tools and try to actually envision that this is, or trying to set the vision in which people don't see this as something coming from the future. It's actually that see this something that is part of the present. And in Fab 10, I think that we managed to have more than 5,000 people from Barcelona coming to an event like this. It's something that never happened before because it's something that some people see, oh, they are the freaks doing stuff there. But actually, you can see that in the whole city, we did an open call for people to exhibit their projects during the Fab Festival. And we had, a range of projects that come from the kind of the guy doing his own open source knitting machine to a business of a guy that actually he offers tourists to make their own souvenirs, their 3D printed souvenirs of themselves. No? So they're like very established kind of businesses to more research practices to more making. As I said before, the city of Barcelona itself is experimenting a very interesting kind of setup of an ecosystem around digital fabrication, which we don't control, but we try to activate and to promote.
Thank you. Just before we finish, there's a final question from a designer in the network. If you were to make a recommendation for a product designer who's just coming into this space, what references or where would you recommend them to go to find out more about the Fab Lab kind of growing global community, more about the maker, the opportunities within this kind of maker space? There seems to be a lot out there, so what directions would you give somebody coming from a design background?
Well, I think the designers have a great challenge, and there is an author called Victor Papanek, and I like very much what he says. I would make this first kind of introduction. He was a professor at MIT back in the 60s and 70s, and Victor Papanek said that industrial designers were the more dangerous professionals in the world because they would design useless stuff made out of very unsustainable materials and work with advertisement companies to make you think that you need something and then to buy it. No, I think that the designers have the challenge of turning design into a service and not anymore as something that is owned by a few group of people. And I think that mostly in general in the very professional fields, we need to think about professional practice as a service. I think the design won't be contained in the final product itself, but actually in the processes and how you can design platforms instead of designing products. As actually will be really interesting to see. Where to start? I'm not sure. I think that you can do just a basic Google search and you will find videos and content around Fab Labs. The best way to start, actually, I will tell you, is go to fablabs.io. It's the platform in which all the Fab Labs are listed, and find your closest Fab Lab and go and visit it. And if it's not fun enough, try to find another one that is more fun for you, because you will find that all Fab Labs are not the same. And then you start to talk to people about digital fabrication and design and making. And I think that's the best way. I think there is nothing else that more important than human contact. And look the excitement about digital fabrication in first hand in a space like a Fab Lab.
Thank you. Is there any closing comments from yourself just before I wrap up and give some pointers as to other sessions people might like to join? Any other points you'd like to make before we close?
No, I think I covered pretty much everything. I think that the questions made me take out a lot of things that I didn't even prepare, so it's great. And I was really excited. It's exciting to share all these thoughts and this idea with all you.
Well, thank you, Thomas, for your time. I know that from experience, I know that you are very busy and keep lots of balls in the air. So I really appreciate you coming in from Mexico today. And I'd like to thank all of our viewers and just highlight some of the sessions that we have coming up. We have Ellen MacArthur coming in from the BSR conference in New York this evening, 10:15 GMT. Ellen will be talking about her journey into the circular economy and what her thoughts have been about the engagement of businesses in this framework. We'll also be hearing from Sir Ken Robinson on Thursday at 3 o'clock GMT. Sir Ken comes from an educational background and will be talking about his vision for education, moving away from a kind of batch production model. And I think some of the ideas that Thomas has spoken about today, the Fab Lab community and the sharing of education platforms and skills has tied into this, the disruptive nature of online education and what it's doing to enable people to engage in this agenda. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from Sir Ken on Thursday, and also make sure that you've got the grand finale for the Disruptive Innovation Festival on the 12th next Wednesday. It's at 5 o'clock GMT. It's a back-to-back session on biomimicry with Janine Benyes and Michael Paulin, who'll be running a session chaired by Ali Valshi. That will be followed by David Rowan, Chief Editor of Wired UK, and Rachel Botsman from the Collaborative Consumption Movement, who'll be talking about the new consumer in this space. So don't miss those sessions coming up on the DIF. And thank you again to Tomas for joining us from Mexico, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of week 3 on the Disruptive Innovation Festival.